After my parents' divorce, I live with them in turn. Mom is outraged by this, and she says that while I'm with my father, she can't see if I live by the rules. There are a lot of rules, I can't really remember them all. It feels like every time I come to my mom, they invent a dozen more new ones. They are grandma, mom, and mom's sister. Grandmother is a widow. Mom's sister also seems to have a husband when you were a husband, but she is now alone, so the three of them live in grandma's apartment. For example, there are rules not to wear white. That bitch. Grandma says when I come to them. He showed up in white again. What did I tell you? Red in the wash, I say. What a fool, my aunt says. My aunt has long dark brown hair, and she looks much younger than her years. She and her mom are real beauties. Your father always wears those smelly white shirts, Grandma says. Therefore, he always has debts and he earns little. White is worn only by the poor. Do you want to be poor? Mom comes up to me and kisses me on the cheek, invites me to the table. They pour me a large bowl of borscht. I eat, and she sits next to me and asks me about grades, about friends, about girls. She's in a good mood. I dip a piece of bread into borscht, and she sees it, and her affectionate smile is replaced by a grimace of anger. Where are you dipping your bread? She screams. Every time you dip bread into borscht, a child dies somewhere. Don't you feel sorry for other people's children? You said that a child dies if you throw away bread, I say. A child gets cancer if you throw away bread. Grandma comes into the kitchen. And if you dip bread in borscht, the child dies. Can't you see? Borscht is red like blood. You're just as cruel as your father. The same murderer. My father says that there is a reason in all my mother's and grandmother's rules. The white color is very marky, and dipping bread in borscht is simply ugly. But Mom explains everything differently, that's why they are divorced. There are rules that I myself strictly observe. I don't cross the road at a red light, I don't pick up the phone if an unknown or hidden number calls me, I don't open the door if it rings, and I'm not waiting for anyone. Dad says that if you switch to red, a car can hit you, and strangers can turn out to be scammers. Mom and Grandma explain it in their own way. They say that if you cross the road at a red light, your teeth will fall out, and the devil is calling from a hidden number. If the number is not familiar or hidden, or the doorbell rings, but it's dark in the peephole and no one answers, then the devil has come. Some rules I follow, and some I forget, which incredibly pisses off my grandmother, mother, and aunt. For example, the curtains in my grandmother's apartment are constantly drawn, all the windows are covered with thin tulle, and at night they are additionally closed with dense curtains. One day I go to the window and pull back the curtains to look out the window. Fuck, did you do that? Grandma screams and, jumping to the window, pulls the curtains with a sharp jerk. Why the fuck do I need strangers to look in my windows? You live on the 6th floor, I say. Who will look in? Oh, Grandma is clutching at her heart. It hurts. You're going to drive me to my grave. Lena. Bad. Lena. Mom and Aunt run up to Grandma and start fussing and wailing around her. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? Mom screams. Do you want to take Grandma to the grave? By the way, about the graves, as I said before, you can't throw away bread. Therefore, if the bread becomes stale or covered with mold, we go to bury it in the yard. For such occasions, Mom even keeps a black t-shirt in the dresser, which I have to wear to the funeral. Bread, it is born and grows like a new life, my mother explains to me, while I, puffing, dig a hole for a grave in the yard. If bread dies, it needs to be buried in a human way, otherwise it will begin to take revenge. Children will start to get sick. As mold spores hit bread, so cancer cells will hit a child's lungs. You can't throw away bread, you're condemning someone's child. Bread is solemnly placed in the grave, grandmother reads a prayer, and after a minute of silence I bury the whole. Almost every funeral of bread is accompanied by a deafening shout from the chairman of the cooperative. Grandma says it's because the chairman of the cooperative, damn, she serves the devil and wants to ruin as many children's souls as possible, and therefore does not let us bury bread. That's a bitch. Grandma says when we return to the apartment after the funeral. Brat. After the last funeral, I watched all night near the window, and do you know what I saw? How she dug up bread, even at midnight. Well, what can I say, Mom, we did everything we could, says Aunt. We will be rewarded for this in the next world. Mom says that after their death, someone will have to keep order in the world, observing all these rules. He says it will be me. They advise me to get a notebook to write down the rules. There are many rules. For example, Grandma needs dough. Mom and Aunt come up, pinch off a piece of raw dough for themselves and eat. Thanks to this, we preserve youth and beauty, says Mom. And Dad said that if there is raw dough, there will be an inversion of the intestines, I remember. That's why your dad looks like an ass, Grandma replies. He will never have a mistress or another wife. Dad really doesn't have a mistress or another wife. Sometimes Grandma, Mom and Aunt forget to follow the rules themselves. In these cases, they suffer a lot. For example, we watch TV with our mother in our arms. Grandma and Aunt are cooking dinner in the kitchen, and suddenly Grandma screams. Mom and I run to her. It's my fault. Grandma screams. I did that. I'm a bitch. I peeled the potatoes with a black knife. The knife had a black handle. I remember this rule. You can't cut food with a black knife. Knives with a black handle are used only for rituals, of which Grandma, Mom and Aunt know a huge variety. Grandma and Aunt cry loudly in chorus. Mom is sad. In the evening, when Grandma and Aunt, drunk in valerian, are already sitting calm in front of the TV, a big car accident in our city is shown on the news. 2 dead. It's my fault, my grandmother tells me. I cut it with the wrong knife. But never mind, I will pray for these people all night. Indeed, I wake up several times that night and see through the half-open door how she is mumbling a prayer in the next room, kneeling and covering her head with a handkerchief. In the morning, her eyes are red. I saw the chairman of the cooperative, my aunt said that day, after returning from the store. She looked at me happily and grinned, knowing the same about the knife. So happy. Apparently, there were children among the dead. The devils have already informed her, Mom answers. I know about the devils. There are a lot of devils in the house where Grandma, Mom and Aunt live. The main thing among the devils is Vyatakin's daughter. When my parents hadn't divorced yet, and we all lived in this apartment together, I went to school next to this house. Vyatakin works there as a caretaker. The grandmother says that Vyatakin's wife is a witch who has fun with devils, and that she has worked up her daughter Anya from devils. Anya, according to her grandmother, spies on our family and reports everything to her mother and other demons. It's funny, considering that Anya is 3 years old and she can't speak yet. He only works as a state farm for show, Mom says. But in fact they are millionaires. Then he works as a caretaker to be closer to the children, to harm them. Looking at the sad face of Vyatakin, who drinks all weekend in his garage, it's hard to imagine that he is a millionaire. But Mom says that evil spirits are always hiding and acting secretly. I left a candle for Anya to rest in the church, says my aunt. It won't help, Grandma answers, she's not even human. I don't really like living with my grandmother, mother and aunt. I am not so confused by the rules as by the eternal tantrums accompanying their non-fulfillment. The biggest tantrum happened when I scattered semolina. A nit. My aunt screams when she sees this. What have you done? Mom and Grandma, running to the scream and seeing this, burst into sobs. What have you done? What have you done? Grandma screams. Whoever spills semolina on Monday, the mother will die. How could you forget? Mom cries, covering her face with her hands, and then abruptly calms down and runs to the kitchen table. He jumps on a chair, then on a table, throws open the windows and shouts. I won't wait for my death. If my own son did this to me, I'd rather kill myself. Write it on my grave, her own son killed her. Grandma falls to her knees, begging Mom not to jump out of the window, and Aunt crying tells me. The brute. How could you kill your own mother? For this, I have to kneel for a few hours service in the church. However, for some reason, Mom never dies, and for this reason, Dad teases her every time they meet for a few more months. My mom remembers my dad with sadness. He was a good man, she says. I would have lived with him if he had followed the rules. And somehow I come home from work, and he eats fish. Fish. I told him 100 times, Andriashenka, please God, don't eat fish on Friday. I wrote the menu, hung it on the refrigerator so that I knew what and when I could take it from there. Couldn't wait until Saturday afternoon. Because of that unfortunate fish, we got divorced. My aunt's personal life is also not glued, and her outstanding beauty does not help her. I don't know what happened to her husband, whether he left or died, but she blames herself for what happened to him. Every Thursday, she prays all night on her knees, asking to be absolved of her sin for her husband. They make me accountable for every rule I have to follow while I'm living with Dad. For every unfulfilled rule, I am showered with curses. How can you forget that you can't cut around on Monday? Grandma screams, rolling her eyes. I've told you 100 times. Every weekend you go and buy oblong bread, not round. Make it a habit to buy a loaf always. It's long. Grandma shows with her hands which one. You go to the bread gift and buy grain every Sunday. It's so hard to remember. Yes, Dad bought it round, I say. Dad, your mother did the right thing by divorcing him. I'll have to take you away from him for good. That's what I'm most afraid of. Fortunately, I am already old enough that I cannot be influenced in this regard. In order not to be yelled at, I'm lying about the rules. I say that I remember everything and do everything. But then I pour myself on some little things, and Grandma and Mom realize that in fact I don't remember the rules very well. Somehow we go to the market. The trip to the market is carefully planned because of the excess of rules. You should go to the market only after you thoroughly take a bath. To buy a certain product, there is a certain day and a certain bag. The most important day is Friday, because on Friday we buy vegetables and herbs from the saleswoman of the Rose. Rosa is a plump black-haired woman of Oriental origin. She has huge black eyes, and Grandma says that witches have black eyes. Aunt says she saw Rose's tail when she bent over for parsley. And she bends down, sweatpants slip off her, says her aunt. And the tail is moving on the lower back, and it's all in the hair. Hairy for those witches who do a lot of evil. When I ask why we should not take anything from Rose, Grandma replies that they put a spell on Rose at every purchase so that she could not conjure and harm people. After washing up in the bathroom, we all put on something red. This is a prerequisite. Grandma says that evil spirits don't like red. Give me the bag. Mom says when we are already putting on our shoes in the hallway. Not this one. Have you forgotten what kind of bag we go for vegetables with? Blue. And this is for meat. I remember that on Friday you can't eat and buy meat and fish, because on Friday Christ was crucified. But that there is a separate bag for them flew out of my head. They reprimand me all the way to the market for this. Rosa looks at us with hostility. To tell the truth, everyone looks at us with hostility. No one likes three wonderful aunts who can't choose a product for half an hour and only delay customers. In fact, Grandma specifically distracts Rose by choosing tomatoes and cucumbers, while Mom and Aunt secretly perform the ritual. I do not know what it is, but I also have a role in it. When Mom nods her head at me, I have to quietly take one tomato or cucumber out of the drawer and put it in my pocket. Mom says that with this one cucumber, we take away from Rose all the witchcraft that she brings to people through her food. Everything goes according to plan that day. While Grandma is looking at the price for a long time and sorting vegetables, Mom and Aunt conduct a ritual. I see my mother whispering something, and my aunt discreetly throws a small pinch of salt on the ground. At some point, Mom nods at me, and I bend over the drawer to pick up a cucumber. Glancing at Rosa, I see that she is looking at me. "What are you doing there with your hands?" She screams. "I saw you put it in your pocket." "Don't yell at my son." My mother screams, and my grandmother babbles angrily. "Why are you so mad about one cucumber? Perhaps our red coats annoy you?" "Yeah, bitch. You don't like red, do you? That day we left the market with a scandal." "Well, you're a bastard," my grandmother tells me later, offended. "I've done a lot of things, I've ruined everything at the last moment. I swam, and on the shore I shit myself." "Come on, Ma," Aunt says. "I'm going to her tonight, and he'll help me, since he ruined everything." Since the witchcraft didn't work out, my aunt will be with me late at night, and we go to the house of that saleswoman. She lives on the outskirts, in a small lopsided hut surrounded by vegetable gardens, on which she grows her vegetables. Evil spirits like to take in beggars, and she likes to stay close to poverty. But they only pretend to be beggars. In fact, everything in their house is in gold. "Do you want to look out the window?" I refuse. There is no dog in Aunt Rosa's yard, so Aunt freely crawls over the low fence and begins to scatter salt around the perimeter of the yard, muttering something to herself. And I stand on the lookout at the gate, looking wistfully at this sad sight. "She's got chicken heads stuck right in the ground there," Aunt says later, sticking straight out of the ground. "She's the one raising the devils," Grandma answers. "Did you sprinkle salt on them?" "Yes, of course." "Well done. Tomorrow, as we pass by the Rose in the market, you'll see, her whole face will be stained red." The next day we go for meat and fish and keep a close eye on the Rose. And she still looks at us with the same hostility. Her face was really covered in some small red spots. "What did I say?" Grandmother proudly remarks. "It's good that we're in red, and she won't jinx us." After school, I'm going to study in another city. Every day Mom calls and asks what rules I have followed. That the loaf was bought well, she approves, and that the menu was written, but do not forget that on Thursday and Friday she starts listing and it drags on for half an hour. "What's that in your fridge?" Asks Sonia, the girl I started dating recently. Oh, yes, so that you can eat a variety and correctly. And why can't you eat fish and meat on Friday? Christ was crucified on Friday, I answer. Sonia looks at me strangely, but out of respect is silent. While I'm frying scrambled eggs, she puts the kettle on and takes sausage out of the fridge to make sandwiches. This loaf is bad, she concludes, looking into the bread box. Ugh, mold. And she throws it in the trash. I don't dare say anything to her. In a week we have grief. Her younger brother finds lung cancer. Comforting her crying, I remember that bread in the trash. Is it really true? 2 months later we have lunch, her phone rings. Pashenka died, Sonia says, hanging up the phone, and starts crying. I look at her plate of borscht, pieces of bread are floating in it. On the anniversary of the relationship, she gives me a white shirt. The next day I lose my job. Remembering that only poor people wear white, I throw the donated shirt into the trash. Soon I find a new job, better than the old one. The worst thing happens when, rushing to this new job of mine, I cross the road at a red light. During the lunch break, chewing the fish put on that day, I feel something strange in my mouth. Got a bone? I think and decide to carefully spit it out into a napkin. I spit out the bone along with the tooth. Until the evening, I have 2 more teeth falling out, and 3 begin to wobble. I'm almost crying. The next day I'm already on the train to my hometown to my mother and grandmother, hoping that they will return my teeth to me. I ring the doorbell for a long time, they don't open it for me. I hear the door quietly open from behind. I turn around. Anya Vyatakina is watching me intently through the half-open door, spying. I leave the entrance and walk around the house. I find my mother, grandmother and aunt in the backyard, they are burying bread once again. The chairman of the cooperative silently watches them from afar. When Anna sees me, she grimaces, probably because I'm wearing a red shirt. Oh, my son, how are you here? Mom asks in surprise. In response, I start crying, showing my mouth, in which half of the teeth are no longer there. Oh, my God. Grandma screams. Did you cross the road at a red light? The chairman of the cooperative looks at me with greedy curiosity. Grandma cooks some poultices and puts them on my teeth. At night I wake up several times and run to the mirror, checking if my new teeth are loose. Standing like this at the mirror, I hear a strange noise on the street. Looking out of the window, I see how the chairman of the cooperative digs up buried bread during the day. I look at the clock, it's midnight. My phone is ringing, the number is hidden. I pick up the phone, there's silence. There is a gentle scratching at the door. I go up and look through the peephole, it's dark there. Has the devil really come? Someone is giggling outside the window. I turn around and catch a glimpse of pale faces there, even though we live on the 6th floor. The next morning I buy a notebook to write down the rules.